China is now exploiting very cynically the way that we are tearing ourselves apart, and particularly the way our left is tearing into us. This identity politics, the moral relativism, the exaggeration of our supposed racism, the attacks on our supposed history of genocide. In fact, the kind of stuff, the kind of absurd criticism I heard just yesterday right here on Sky News from Mark Liebler, co-chair of the Referendum Council that wants Australia to have a kind of Aboriginal-only advisory parliament.
We didn't occupy this country by consent. We started off by murdering them.
Who is this we? Who is this we that Mark Liebler says started off here by murdering Aborigines? It wasn't me. It wasn't my parents. It wasn't my grandparents back in Holland. Was it you? Was it you that sort of went off murdering Aborigines? No, it wasn't. This was, in fact, Mark Liebler, like so many, I don't want to pick on him particularly, Mark Liebler does a lot of good things, particularly about Israel. This was just Mark Liebler preaching racial guilt, the poison of identity politics. If you are white, then you are, of course, a murderer, or you bear responsibility for murderers that other whites that you didn't know and weren't related to, never knew about. You bear responsibility for murders that those other whites committed 2 centuries ago, allegedly. Because, by the way, the British back then did not start off murdering Aborigines. That is a grotesque exaggeration, but also a dangerous one. It's dangerous because the Chinese dictatorship is now using this kind of stuff against us. Like I say, very deliberately. And it's using it against the rest of the West too, to make us weaker and itself stronger. This week's example, a senior spokesman of the Chinese Foreign Affairs Department used the language of Australian activists to claim that Australian-built detention centres on Manus Island, actually built to stop illegal immigrants, not many of them from war-torn countries, they were actually concentration camps. I mean, concentration camps? This is from China that has shipped up to 1 million Muslim Chinese into real concentration camps and locked up Christians, locked up human rights activists, locked up Falun Gong practitioners too. But now get this, despite all its own crimes against human rights, despite China itself banning democracy, banning free speech, crushing freedom now in Hong Kong, the world, thanks to another poison of moral relativism, the world let China last year join the Human Rights Council of the United Nations, along with Communist Cuba and Russia, which happens to murder dissidents. And in this corrupt Human Rights Council, this communist Chinese dictatorship now lectures Australia about human rights. In January, for instance, it claimed that Australia was some kind of hellish and racist and a bunch of war criminals, really, that goes around murdering Aborigines.
First, take actions to combat racial discrimination, hate speech and violence, and protect the rights of ethnic minorities. Second, protect the rights of migrants and close offshore detention centres for migrants. Third, thoroughly investigate the war crimes committed by the Australian military overseas military operations, pursue the responsibilities of perpetrators, and prevent impunity and recurrence of similar crimes. Fourth, eliminate systematic discrimination against Aboriginals and combat violence against them.
What an incredible and offensive lecture from a bunch of hypocrites and worse, a dictatorship, that as we speak, has 2 Australians, including a journalist, locked up simply for criticising China, a country that, or a regime rather, that is so racist, that is trying to virtually wipe out Tibetan and Uyghur culture. And it's not just Australia that China is attacking this way. China did exactly the same at this month's summit with the United States, exploiting the Black Lives Matter riots and the growing contempt among some in the West for democracy. The voice you hear here is of an interpreter.
There are many problems within the United States regarding human rights, And the challenges facing the United States in human rights are deep-seated. They did not just emerge over the past 4 years, such as Black Lives Matter. It did not come up only recently.